to Professor Hongyin Tao and everything. But in the meantime, though, I want to welcome him because this is the first time he has come to OSU, and his, so he has some kind of nostalgic feelings about us because his advisor, Professor Sandra Thompson, did her PhD here. And so this is the first time here, so I say, this is where his advisor had studied. So with that, I pass it to Professor Hongyin. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Marge, and thank you for the organizers to organize such a very important event, the 30th anniversary of the NACO. And OSU has been a sacred place for me because of all the connections all the years. So this is very exciting for me to be here. So anyway, I think we are going to do a corpus linguistic, very tight in time. So basically, we want to have a very quick overview of corpus linguistics. So we have set up some goals, very moderate, modest goals for a lot of questions, such as what's the nature of corpora and what kind of corpus resource available, and how to do research with corpora, how to do teaching with corpora. So very, great topics, but given the time limit, I think our learning goal is actually very limited. You want to get to talk a little bit about everything, but just a very brief overview, and hopefully will arouse your interest in corpus linguistics. So I need a lot of help. So I got two keynote speakers. They are very experienced researchers. I have Ju Ren and Jing Zhuo, Jing Lao Shi. Both of them are very experienced. So they will help me with a lot of things. So basically, we have, I'll do a very little brief introduction, and then Jing Lao Shi will talk about some methodological issues. And then back to me, I'll talk about some very quick tips. I think all the handouts are in the shared folder. You should have a copy of everything. And then we'll take a break, and then after we come back, Ju Ren will talk more about some online resources and tools. And then we'll do some practical things, and then we'll wrap up. So we'll try to be on schedule. Okay, so corpus linguistics, I think there is a lot of things have been said about corpus linguistics, whether it's a methodology or branch of linguistics. That's a big issue we don't need to worry about. To me, corpus linguistics basically, you look at actual language use, use corpus to computer tools. So that's basically what people usually do. But as a methodology, it actually has revolutionized many branches of corpus linguistics. That's why you see that debate whether it's a methodology or branch of corpus linguistics. That's of theoretical interest. But actually, you can do, a lot of people can do corpus-related work without claiming that you are doing corpus linguistics. For example, there are studies such as this, whether when people collect a lot of instant messages and look at the language of instant message, and among couples, college students, and see how language use correlate with their personal relationship after a certain time period, and go back and see whether the use of pronouns correlate with different kind of relations. That's a psychological study, but to me it's a kind of corpus-based study because it's a collection of instant messages during some period of time. And people in the business field, they have looked at leadership roles, such as this guy, world's most richest person. His leadership over the years. Look at his use of personal pronouns, we and I, over the past decade or so, and they found interesting patterns. And then in Chinese, people look at Wang Feng Lao Shi, if you know Wang Feng, and some, very enthusiastic, amateurs look at Wang Feng's style because they feel all the sound similar. So they collect a lot of lyrics from Wang Feng's songs, over 117 songs, and look at the key, parts of speech, nouns, verbs, adjectives, and look at the frequency. And then if you know the frequency, and you can give any number, for example, the reporter's newspaper addresses the street address 6906. If you look for number 6 and then number 960, 迷茫桥爱祈祷. So you can make up a lyric, line, 迷茫的桥上的孩子让爱为他祈祷. That sounds very much like Wang Feng. It's not a corpus linguistic study, but to me it's similar. So in terms of what's actually a corpus, or what plural corpora, it's basically a computerized database. So you collect a lot of data, computerize it, and very importantly, it should be a principled collection. It's not just some random collection. If you do random collection, a lot of so-called corpora, they are not very good. They're not very useful because you don't know what's behind the collection. So you have to have some theory behind the collection. And it could be spoken, could be written. And nowadays, increasingly have multimedia, multimodal, data. So in terms of language features, you might have, general language, including multiple genres. It could be a specialized language. For example, instant messages, maybe recipes, something highly, specialized. It's called specialized language. It could be learner language, produced by learners. It could be monolingual versus, bilingual. Monolingual means one language. Multiple languages are parallel, have similar text, but from different languages translated usually. So that's, based on the language feature. Because there are lots of resources, what kind of resource do we use? Here is a very basic, sketch. You could use online resources. You could use something based on your local desktop, tools or data. It could be self-developed. If you know how to program, you can do a lot of programming. So you have a lot of choices. But the first one, online, you don't need to do much. If you have a browser, you can do it. But that's least flexible. If you use online resources, a lot of things you can't do because you have to be confined to whatever the developers provide. If you use the desktop tools, you can do a lot of things. That's why we're going to introduce some of the desktop tools and data. If you can do your own, you can program, you can collect your own. That's most flexible, but the most effort you have to put into that. So that's a trade-off. And also people ask questions, how much data should I use in order to be considered a corpus-based study? There's a lot of debate. For example, some people say the more the better, and other people say not necessarily, depending on how you use it, what kind of data you use. And Jing Laoshi will talk about this more later. But in general, if you do a lexical-semantic kind of lexical-based studies, the more the better, because some uses are not very frequent. But if it's grammatical studies, syntactic studies, maybe you don't need too much data. So that's a general, conception. So in terms of corpus linguistics, there are different kinds. People do natural language processing. That's one kind of corpus linguistics that's highly technical. It's very popular, very important these days for artificial intelligence. But for us, mostly we do language-related research. And people specialize in literary criticism, they can also do corpus-based. So we are kind of in the middle. Okay, so final discussion. Corpora always good. So I have to, give you some cautious note. Usually, people who are interested in corpus-based studies, they are of this camp, interested in performing observable data, looking at probability, so on and so forth. Empirically oriented. If you, do competence, based, if you're interested in, abstract universals and intuition, that's probably not the place, for you to do it. Although increasingly many people are using. So, people talk about the tendency. Brian Joseph here, when he left the post for the language, editor of language, he talked about recent tendencies. One is experimental tendency. The other is corpus-based. So there's a strong tendency. But if you ask, Chomsky, in one of the interviews conducted in 2004, Chomsky says, corpus linguistics doesn't mean anything. And he has his own, reason because he believed, science doesn't go out, collect data, and see how people do things naturally. That's what he's claiming. And people like Neumeyer talks about questions the usefulness of using frequency data because he's interested in things like building abstract model and things like that. So I'll skip this. Corpus-based, corpus-driven, that's another question, basically. Whether you have a hypothesis or not, if you don't have a hypothesis, you rely on the corpus, then that's corpus-driven. But if you have something you want to use corpus data to argue for or against, that's corpus-based. You don't need to worry too much about it. So just a final note, a limitation of corpora, even though we're all interested, but we have to know that sometimes for some research questions, corpora are not always good, and some of the corpus data are not always useful for all kinds of research questions. So I think there are more research methodological questions that Jing Laoshi will discuss with everyone. So I'm already a few minutes over the limit, so I'll turn the floor to Jing Laoshi.